Welcome to our in-depth look at the first week of proceedings in the Joshlin Smith trial, a case that's captured South Africa's attention and stirred deep emotions across the country. In this Wisher Post analysis, we'll unpack what happened over the last 5 days in court, how it affects the prosecution's arguments, where the defense stands, and why the mother of the missing child, Kelly Smith, has emerged as a polarizing figure. Before we dive in, your subscription or simply commenting or liking and sharing this video is much appreciated. I want to begin by clarifying the stakes in this case. We've got 3 individuals, Kelly Smith, Jacquen Appollis, and Steveno van Rhyn, accused of playing a role in the disappearance of 6-year-old Joshlin Smith. This past week of testimony has revealed numerous contradictions, shifting timelines, and glaring tensions, both inside and outside the courtroom. First, let's recall who these defendants are. Kelly Smith is Joshlin's mother, Jacquen is her boyfriend, and Steveno is a family associate, so to speak. Each one insists on their innocence, yet their accounts of what happened the day Joshlin vanished are inconsistent. There's also a fourth figure, Lourentia Lombaard, who was initially charged, but later granted immunity in exchange for her testimony. She's now the state's star witness. Here's a TLDR summary of each of the defendants' plea statements that they entered into record about what they did that day. Kelly swears she woke up that morning to a small domestic crisis. Joshlin's school uniform was too filthy for class. Believing her daughter would stay at home and laze around, Kelly took her youngest, a 2-year-old girl at the time, to the creche. Then she rushed to her job. She managed a quick return at lunchtime, just enough to grab 50 rand, light up some crystal meth with Jacquen, and then bolt back to work. By the time she got home after 5, she discovered Joshlin wasn't waiting as usual. Still, she didn't sound the alarm right away. She claimed she assumed her 6-year-old was wandering around with the neighbor's kids as usual, and so the clock ticked until nearly 9 p.m. before Kelly finally called the cops. Yes, the night ended in panic and frantic questions. But according to Kelly, she had no reason to flip out before then. She was simply, a bit too simply some say, expecting Joshlin to wander back home. Jacquen spins a narrative about an ordinary day gone to hell. He says early that morning, Joshlin took a bath before Kelly ducked out to work. Sometime later, Lourentia popped by, pestering him for a smoke. He obliged, rolling or making a cigarette or weed. He's vague on details. The hours slipped away until around 2 in the afternoon when Jacquen saw Joshlin heading off to play. He insists he didn't worry. Kids roam in this neighborhood all the time. But come evening, when the sun had dipped and the neighbors were already scouring the block for Joshlin, Jacquen admits he snuck off to buy drugs with Steveno. By the time they got back, well after 10 p.m., the police were all over the place. His story is a jumbled timeline of crystal meth fixes and quiet guilt, but at its core, he claims no knowledge of where Joshlin vanished to or why. Steveno's version is the one that flips everything upside down. If you believe him, none of this was Kelly's or Jacquen's fault. He says he showed up at the shack around midday, hoping to hawk a microwave. He noticed Lourentia was hanging around, apparently bored and itching for a pipe. This is weed, we assume. Fast forward a couple of hours. Lourentia allegedly called Joshlin over, told the kid to go check on her baby at Laurentia's place, then followed close behind. Steveno insists that's the last time he set eyes on Joshlin, walking away alongside the very woman who's now wearing the prosecution's halo. His story, if true, tosses the entire official narrative off a cliff. Did Lourentia spirit Joshlin away? Why would she? And if it's a lie, then is Steveno just scrambling for any excuse to save his own skin? After all, he was high, he was broke, and he was desperate enough to pass blame on anyone who might take it. Put these 3 accounts side by side, and you've got a tangled, maddening puzzle. Each one is missing key details, like what Joshlin was really doing between noon and evening, and each betrays a different vibe. Denial from Kelly, half-baked casualness from Jacquen, and outright finger-pointing from Steveno. The prosecution thinks these holes scream cover-up, the defense calls it a panic swirl of confusion, and somewhere in the middle, Joshlin is still missing. Over the course of 5 days, We've heard from police officers, the station commander, and a detective who all played significant roles in the initial search for Joshlin. Their accounts introduced the core issues shaping the case. On days 1 and 2, two constables, Yanga Gongota and Luzuko Kobese, described arriving at Kelly's residence when Joshlin was first reported missing. One particularly striking observation was the impression of Kelly as appearing irritated rather than distraught. This odd demeanor raised the question of whether she was truly alarmed about Joshlin's disappearance. It also emerged that the constable's official statements were suspiciously similar, prompting questions about whether they wrote them independently or if they inadvertently influenced each other. On day 3, we saw a flurry of cross-examinations. Kelly's behavior remained a major talking point. While the prosecution contends her annoyance signals possible involvement or indifference, her lawyer suggested her reaction might have been shaped by external pressures, an irate crowd gathered around her, drug use, or even the emotional toll of a missing child. The judge cautioned that if the defense can prove the police officer's statements were compiled in a coordinated manner, they could be thrown out. This poses a serious risk for the prosecution, which is heavily reliant on the claim that Kelly acted suspiciously on the night in question. Day 4 took the court outside for an on-site visit of key locations around Saldanha Bay. This, the state explained, was crucial for the judge to have a complete picture of the environment authorities were working with, as well as an indication of the missing child's upbringing. The somber walkabout through the narrow corridors of the Diazville informal settlement was especially hard for Kelly, who not only sustained injuries on her ankles due to the friction caused by the shackles, but also broke down in tears at the sound of an angry group of community members chanting, "We want Joshlin." When the court resumed later that afternoon, Colonel Lyndon Sebola, the station commander, guided the court through the search's early phases. He recalled challenges such as having to manage public unrest and sifting through mostly fruitless leads. Notably, he testified that Kelly seemed unfazed and even allegedly told people, open quote, "My child has made me famous," close quote. That statement, if confirmed, puts her in a harsh light. Her tears during the site visit may have shown a woman under immense strain, but it is still unclear whether that emotion was genuine stress for her missing daughter or reaction to the crowd's hostility. On day 5, Detective Sergeant Mayor Milstein testified about the progress of the case from a more investigative standpoint. He recounted early theories that ranged from a possible Muti-related abduction by someone named Ayanda, said to be Lombard's partner, to the notion that Joshlin might have been taken by a local drug supplier known only as Gums. Crucially, these lines of inquiry turned up no direct evidence of Joshlin's whereabouts. Milstein noted that Kelly, Jacquen, and Lourentia each changed their stories repeatedly, making it nearly impossible to solidify a concrete timeline. He also confirmed that local political figures applied pressure on the police to arrest Steveno and Ayanda, pressure he resisted due to a lack of concrete proof. As for the 3 defendants themselves, each has a distinct defensive angle. Kelly's legal team insists her unusual response does not necessarily indicate guilt. They highlight her antidepressant use and the possibility that her behavior was influenced by drug withdrawal or the advice of relatives urging her to remain composed. Meanwhile, Jacquen's lawyer focuses on potential procedural errors, especially around how his statements were taken and translated, and Steveno's lawyer raises the issue of alleged torture and forced confessions, pointing out that he, like Jacquen, claims to have been coerced into incriminating admissions. Collectively, these testimonies have set the stage for an increasingly complex legal battle. The prosecution contends that all 3 defendants played some part in Joshlin's disappearance, either by direct involvement or through a chain of negligence. They consider Kelly's seemingly detached conduct, Jacquen's shifting statements, and Steveno's efforts to implicate Lourentia as indications that the accused are hiding something. Yet the defense continues to challenge nearly every piece of evidence or testimony, arguing that inconsistent recollections, questionable police record keeping, and outside interference complicate the narrative. One weekend, Kelly Smith remains the focal point of curiosity, while Colonel Sebola and others suggest her lack of visible distress is incriminating. Her lawyers maintain it proves nothing more than a fraught emotional state. Over the next phase of the trial, much may depend on how well the defense can contextualize her behavior in a way that counters the state's implication of indifference or complicity. After 5 days of testimony and cross-examination, the trial reveals a tangled web of drug use, community tensions, and conflicting recollections. The state's hope rests largely on the word of Lourentia Lombaard, who remains a looming presence offstage, ready to testify. The defense aims to break the credibility of police witnesses and cast doubt on whether Kelly's odd behavior equates to guilt. Ultimately, the fate of these three defendants hinges on whether the court accepts that their actions point to conspiracy or if the confusing circumstances merely obscure a tragic situation. For now, the crucial question, what actually happened to 6-year-old Joshlin, remains painfully unanswered. This brings us to the end of our first weekly deep dive of the Joshlin Smith trial. We will drop the next review next week Sunday. If you tuned in this far, I highly appreciate it and thank you for listening. Drop a comment below on what you thought of the episode or anything about the trial so far, and I will give out personal shoutouts in the next episode. We are also constantly posting stories that matter to South Africans and the rest of the world on our news website. Visit swisherpost.co.za for the best explainers about every important thing happening around you. No agenda, just the story.